or the hypodermis, which is the same thing. Understand, Mr. Tayo, that we have blood supply. We have nice and thick blood vessels here.
Yeah.
Well, thicker compared to the other ones. And we have some right here because these are all part of our capillaries, right?
Yeah.
And then they send some thinner blood vessels up this way. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Notice that the blood vessels are confined to the subcutaneous tissue and to the dermis. It's not part of the epidermis. You notice that?
Yes, sir.
When it comes to burns, the burns can affect different layers of the skin. Understand that it could be all the way this way. It could come down to the dermal layer, and then it could go all the way down to the subcutaneous tissue, sometimes even deeper. Does that make sense, sir?
Yes, sir.
When you have a burn that encompasses the first layer of the skin, this is known as a superficial burn. It used to be called first-degree burns.
First degree, okay.
But this is a superficial burn. It only burns the epidermis. Have we burned any of the blood vessels? Where are the blood vessels, Mr. Tayo?
The blood vessels are in the sub in the
Subcutaneous?
subcutaneous, yeah.
And where else?
And the dermis.
Is it inside the epidermis?
Yes, not epidermis.
Where do you see the blood vessels, Mr. Tayo?
The blood vessels are the blue.
Blue and red. Where are they at?
They are in the dermis, the epidermis.
The upper dermis.
Not epidermis, the hypodermis.
Oh, hypodermis. Yeah. So do you have any blood vessels in the epidermis?
Yeah.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
No. Do we have any blood vessels in the epidermis?
No.
That's what I wanted. Okay, good. So understand that your superficial burns, it's just like a regular sunburn. The blood vessels are not affected. That's what I wanted you to understand.
Oh,
It's painful, but the nerves are not, the blood vessels are not affected. And one more thing, keep in mind that we also have, we have nerves also that, let's say this way like this, and then they also send the thinner nerves up here as well. Okay.
Yes,
so
sir.
That's what I wanted to say. Okay, so that's the first type of burn. If it affects the top part, which is known as the epidermis, that's considered a superficial burn.
Okay.
When you have a burn that affects the dermal layer, that's known as a partial thickness burn. Okay.
That's the second degree.
It used to be called the second degree. Now, what did we just damage? Now that you have a burn to the at least part of the dermal layer, now you've damaged the blood vessels, correct?
Yes.
Understand that any burns that are partial thickness or more, you're gonna be losing fluids because you're burning the fluids that are inside the blood vessels. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I want you to keep that in mind. Okay. The partial thickness burns can be classified as superficial partial thickness.
Yeah.
Which means that it affected the entire epidermis all the way down to at least a small part of the dermal layer. So that's why it's called superficial partial thickness. But the word partial thickness, that lets you know it's affected the dermal layer, the second part of the skin, okay?
Yes, sir.
And then you have a deep partial thickness burn. This means that it's burned all the way down to the deep layers of the dermis. But it's still only in the dermis. It has not penetrated the subcutaneous tissue. That's why it's still considered overall partial thickness burn, meaning what used to be called second degree. Does that make sense, sir?
Yes, sir.
The third degree, or the deepest layer the next one is called full thickness.
Full thickness.
Full thickness burns. And that used to be your third degree burn. Okay. And that's, of course, encompassing the entire layers of the skin. You can have a fourth degree, which is now known as a deep, full thickness.
Wow.
Okay. And that's affecting all three layers of the skin, but also potentially bones and muscles.
Oh, okay. Wow.
Does that make sense, sir?
Yes, sir.
Keep in mind that when you have any burns that affect the second degree of the second layer of skin, meaning the dermis, and below that, now you're also considering fluid loss.
Yeah.
But it's only a problem when you've burned 20% of your body's fluid. That's why if you have a burn that's 20% of the body surface area, meaning BSA or more, that's when you start considering hypovolemic shock. Because that's when you're losing. If you're burning 20% of your blood vessels, meaning you've burned 20% of your body surface area, and if it's at least partial thickness or deeper, then you're going to consider this potential problem.